Good afternoon. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Lauren.
Always love when folks wave.
Hi, Amanda.
So good
Good to
to
see
see
you.
everyone.
Hi, Rick. Good seeing you.
All right. So very excited to kick things off. Anna is actually on spring break this week, so I have I'm filling in her usual big shoes on introducing FamTech. But for most of you on the line, you've either been to one of these sessions or you're a FamTech member, so this will be familiar to you. Quick intro on us. Welcome, first of all, to those of you who are new to our community. We are the only industry association focused on helping technology startups and companies really have impact in a few key areas. So those are femtech, parent tech, child tech, age tech, elder care, these key care economy areas that a lot of you are building in. And Anna is going to actually be in DC next week to lobby and speak on our behalf. So that's a lot of what we really focus on at FamTech is how to help the member base of folks creating amazing companies in this ecosystem from both a revenue fundraising and also policy perspective. So welcome everyone. Okay, and quick housekeeping before we get started. I just want to share a couple of upcoming events that we have on the docket. So, Anna will be speaking at the Boston College Roundtable in New York on May 6th. And additionally, we have another virtual event on May 15th, which will be with Brooke Shapiro, who many of you have met through the community, who will be really helping us think through how to explore these strategic and mutually beneficial partnerships in the ecosystem among ourselves. So thank you, Brooke, for being a huge contributor on that front. All right. And one thing that we like to do while we're also having folks kind of dial in, transition in, is we love seeing where all of our community members are coming from. So if folks could drop in the chat your name, your company, and where you're dialing in from. I'm in San Francisco currently. That'll be great because we love to see just where everyone is. Alrighty. So with that, let me go ahead and jump into today's session. And I'm super, super excited for today's session because we have three incredible guest speakers with us. And I'm going to introduce them very shortly. But first, I want to just quickly share the background on our HR We There Yet session. So many of you have been part of this for the past 6 sessions. And as you know, I am our entrepreneur in residence at FamTech, co-founder of Cocoon. And my whole goal with these sessions is to really give back to our community, which has been a huge part of Cocoon's success, and help you all with figuring out how do we scale revenue in this space. So for today's session, we're going to do just a quick overview of what is channel, because as I've chatted with many of you, while channel is something that you have heard of, it's not necessarily something that we totally understand what exactly does it mean. And some of those 101 vocab pieces, similar to how we've done that in the past with selling into HR, for example. So it's been a little bit of time there. And then I'm super excited to have Aru, Derek, and Rick, who are our incredible guest speakers for a fireside chat on this demystifying channel. So just really quickly to introduce the three of them. Aru is director at ADP Ventures. Aru, if you don't mind just giving a quick wave.
Guys.
And she is investing in early stage, growth stage tech startups, like many of you in the room, including Cocoon. Aru has been our point person on the Cocoon side, so we're very grateful to her, and has incredible insight into how to work really closely with early stage and growth stage startups to really leverage distribution and product partnerships through the ADP ecosystem. So she'll be a really, really insightful speaker on this topic. Derek is our very own FamTech board member and also founder of Embrace AI, and spent many, many years leading corp dev, corp strat, and product at Workday. As you all may have heard of, Workday is one of the biggest HRIS payroll companies out there. And so very, very relevant to this conversation about how do we partner with these types of companies in order to gain additional distribution for what we're building here in this community. And finally, Rick Porterfield, who leads key markets at Guardian. And Rick and I have known each other for many years, from when Cocoon first started, actually. And Rick's been a huge champion from the early days. So thank you, Rick. And Guardian, for those of you who are not as familiar with the space, is a very well-known insurance company in the ancillary space around disability, life, dental, vision, etc. And so, again, very important partner for a lot of the work that we're doing here and opportunities to amplify FamTech startups, FamTech products, and work together on that front. So thank you, Aru, Derek, and Rick for being with us. Okay, so we'll make sure also post the fireside chat to reserve at least 10 minutes for Q&A from all of us here. That being said, though, for those of you who have been with us for a couple sessions, our norm is that we just ask Q&A throughout. So feel free to either raise your Zoom hand or drop Q&A in the chat and make this conversational, because and I'm sure Aru, Derek, and Rick could go on for ages about channel and how to partner and so forth. But we really want this to be about you all. Okay, awesome. So just to quickly recap where we've been and where we're going. In week 4, we talked about selling into HR. And in week 5, we talked about actually one really key channel for that, which is working with brokers. This week is almost an extension of that conversation because we're talking about channel more broadly. So how do you work with a really, really big player in the space, whether it's an HRIS payroll provider like ADP or Workday, an insurance company like Guardian, to actually sell what you're building one to many? That's really the focus of today's conversation. And so by popular request, what I've heard from you all is that what's also helpful is just a one-on-one on fundamentally what even is a channel. So let's just start there, which is a channel basically helps you sell to more than one buyer at once, right? So think of it as when we had our HR selling into HR conversation, we met El Metza, we met Vivek from Benchling, for example. Normally, if you're doing direct sales, you have a salesperson or you as a founder who is selling directly to that person one-to-one. But with a channel, why this can be really, really impactful over time is that you actually get one-to-many distribution, meaning you could partner with, for example, Rick at Guardian and access a whole segment of Guardian's customers, for instance, or Aru at ADP and access a whole segment of ADP's customers, and so forth. So that's really the idea of why channel matters. The other thing that is really important to note here is that channel partners already have the customers, right? So think of it as folks who are using Guardian for their disability insurance, folks who are using ADP or Workday for their HRIS payroll. They're using those products day in, day out. They already have an existing relationship with them, right? And so what's really unique about working with a channel partner is that you're essentially building upon that pre-existing trust and credibility that is there when it comes to working with selling through a partner. And related to that, it also means that you often get more efficient growth, meaning that instead of having to staff a whole bunch of sales reps for every account that you sell into, you can actually work with a partner and leverage their sales teams, for example, so that your cost of acquisition is actually lower. So huge, huge benefits of cracking this channel nut. We'll also talk a lot about why it's really hard to do. And Aru, Derek, and Rick will give us some insights on that front too. Rick, I saw you come off mute. With anything that you would add to this?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. It's perfectly positioned as kind of a fundamental understanding. And I think what's going to be interesting is as we get into the conversation with Aru and Derek, we all come from 3 different perspectives. But as you peel back the layers of this, what you're going to find is it seems like this big shiny thing that you want to go after with these channels. But I would say there's a lot of patience and persistence that needs to be um, put into perspective around how you approach the channels and everything. So we can dive into that, but this is a great first start.
Absolutely, Rick. I think it's a really good highlight around it seems really shiny and sexy, but there's a lot of challenges in actually breaking in and making it effective, which is what the three of you are here to help us kind of demystify.
That's right.
Okay, so just really quickly, there's a lot of acronyms in our space. We talked about this with HR, where there's a bazillion different titles. In the channel space, there's also a lot of acronyms. So, really quickly, in terms of the types of channels out there that are relevant for selling into HR teams, there are really kind of three major types, in addition to brokers who we talked about last time. So first is HRIS and payroll providers. Many of you are familiar with this. You probably get your paycheck from ADP or Gusto or Workday or Rippling, one of these providers. Um, these are really strategic because, as I mentioned, HR teams are in them day in, day out. And so they're very familiar with them. Kind of, it's a system of record. And so if you are embedded as part of their offering, then that's a huge advantage in terms of distribution, trust, product ease. So that's why these HRS and payroll providers are really critical. Aru, Derek, anything that you would add to that from your perspective at ADP and Workday?
I guess, I would echo what Rick said, as well as just note that, there are going to be these patterns. And then as you approach each one of the names on this slide or others that have some incumbent relationship, they're each going to have their own approaches to how they think about partnering. So, for example, you see ADP's name in two parts in this slide. ADP has a lot of different business lines that I would be able to explain. They may have different approaches to partnering. And so part of the art of this, in my experience, is really understanding some of those idiosyncrasies, both across these types, but also within some of the ecosystems you might decide to work in. And so I think it's reinforcing of what Rick said. I saw you nodding
Yeah.
as be curious what you had to say, because I referenced ADP a couple of times there, but I've seen that pattern. ADP and Workday are going to be different, et
Totally
cetera.
different.
Yeah, I think it also has a lot to do with your customer alignment. Each of these buckets has varying levels of customer alignment, and you might grow into multiple eventually, but there's always going to be a starting point, and the journey is truly different across all three.
Yeah.
Alignment
And
piece is super key. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I would say what's interesting too is you see like ADP showing up a couple different times. The other thing too is like Guardian and what I run a division of Guardian that really handles our whole go-to-market PEO. I own PEO, go-to-market strategy around that. We have about 60 different PEOs. ADP Total Sources being one of the partners that we have on our dental product and so on and so forth. So think about it this way too. You can get in these different channels in different ways. Like if you think about it from our perspective, we have different point solution relationships that we have in various categories, whether it's mental wellness, it could be maternity, it could be a number of different things that we have. If it makes sense to come through the Guardian channel, we then can go and get you embedded because we're the product manufacturer onto these other platforms. So like Gusto, Rippling, we have relationships and product already sitting in their channels today. And you could come in through our door as a way to go one to many in these channels. In addition to how you're going, so if it makes sense to go directly to ADP, makes sense there, but think about it in a couple different ways. We're the product manufacturer that has products sitting on shelves. ADP has the shelves. Workday has the shelves. Rippling has the shelves. And so if you come in our direction, there's a little bit different way to get there versus if you go and try to get through their marketplace or on their shelf.
That's a really good highlight, Rick, because insurance carriers like Guardian, for example, go through channels in addition to being a channel yourselves, whether it's selling through brokers or partnering with ADP Total Source, for example. those are ways
Yeah.
where,
So, and think about it this way. So we 99%, well, I wouldn't say 99 anymore, but I would say the vast majority of, we've been in the insurance business and the group insurance selling to employers for 65 years. And we've done it primarily virtually through brokers and consultants. And so you guys just had a session before talking about how to sell to HR, how to sell to brokers. Well, we already have this massive footprint relationship with the brokering community as it stands today. So rather than going to the big brokering firms and trying to talk to them about your product and everything else, if you come to us, it's just that more efficient from a carrier perspective if we can find a way to fit whatever you're building, and it makes logical sense to do it within our product portfolio footprint, then we would have then in that actually then you've got the dovetailing of our leveraging across that whole brokering channel, as opposed to you spending your time. And I would never, my voice is never go directly to the broker channel if you can avoid it, because it's kind of fool's gold in a way. You really have to spend a tremendous amount of time, and then they don't really have time to listen. So if you can come through like an ADP or a PEO or a carrier, your leverage around their relationships and their distribution channel is going to be way more efficient.
that piece around the strategy of attaching yourself to something that brokers, for example, already talk about, Rick, like health insurance or disability insurance, is really key here as to why insurance is a very strategic channel, so to speak, for this community, because a lot of folks who are building in the FamTech community are building things that are attached to these claims, right? So meaning whether it's something like Cocoon that is attached to a disability claim, a mental health solution that might be related to health insurance or
Or
disability
maternity,
insurance,
yeah.
for example. And so there's a lot of relationships. You all might remember from our session on brokers, Kalina mentioned some of the top claims out there, right? So think about that as part of the reason. It's like if you can attach your solution to one of these claims and get one of these insurance carriers interested, that's also a door in, because brokers and employers, the HR teams, are already having to buy these really top of mind benefits. Cool. Okay. And then just really quickly on PEOs, I know we briefly defined this last time. It's a professional employer org. And I want to go back to what Aru mentioned about the customer type, because one thing to keep in mind is that each of these providers has different types of customers. So, for example, Workday customers are mostly large Fortune 500s, right, Derek? Whereas ADP Total Source, there are a lot of small businesses that may have, call it like 20 or 50 people. And so, depending on who your target market is, the actual partner that you want to choose to focus on among these is going to be different too.
Absolutely. And I think how you enable that partnership, your product, everything sort of adds into that. So you might be duplicating efforts with no linkage whatsoever. So strictly aligning with the customer profile makes so much sense.
Yeah. So I think Aru's advice on thinking about who's the end customer profile you're going after and working backwards to who the right channels are is really key.
Yeah, and I would add that, the SMB space is the largest addressable market, right? We all know that. And so how do you do one to many with the SMB space? And that's really, again, lining through channel opportunities versus trying to, field a sales force to go direct, right? That's just, it's extremely prohibitive to do that. So this is where channels become so strategic for you, because you really have to understand what channel seems to have the right mix of SMB clients, what their mix is of those clients, how they're addressing and coming into the SMB space, whether it's payroll, tax, ben admin, co-employment solutions for PEOs, insurance. All those things are different ways that they're intersected in the SMB space. And so you really have to think about that strategically and say, who do I match up with, whatever I'm building, to come into that channel in a way that's going to be additive to that channel partner, something that's going to align with their product philosophy, with their product underlying products that they already have. is there duplication? Is there somebody else in that space that they already have? And so that's all the analysis. So this is a great start to look at it and then breaking it down to say, who do we want to approach? What are they looking for? Do they have anybody in my space? How do I articulate the gain that they're going to gain out of having my build and product in their environment? And then thinking about how do they sell? So one of the other things you got to think about is ADP is a great example. They have so many SKUs and so many products that they're selling, depending on channel. It's really about the bandwidth. It's learning about the sales environment, the sales culture, and what the sales folks are asked to do to sell in market with that products, with the product mix that they have. So they could have, ADP does this, they do an amazing job selling in market for all their products, but they have a lot of products and their salespeople are focused, are incentivized to sell certain things. And so working backwards and finding somebody inside these channels to understand and give you an insight as to what are the products are they really emphasizing and selling, what's the culture around the sales environment, and how do you make sure that you can, because it's one thing to have like what not to do is to try to create a channel relationship, put your product on there, and then not understand how it's going to get optimized or sold, right? And that is, and then the other thing is to how do you create your product to be implemented in a way where it's super seamless? And this is where the technology implementation onboarding side of your product is. When you go to B2B to C or B2B, you've got to make sure that you understand what that is. What is the dynamic that if I'm putting my product on ADP, for instance, and their folks need to sell it, how are they going to sell it? How's it going to get implemented? And how's it going to get integrated into their platform?
Yeah, actually, to echo that, we did this at Cocoon, and Lauren probably is going to have some flashbacks. But there's truly a crawl, walk, run when you think about partnerships. Um, it is so difficult to find a way to sell a Cocoon on top of everything that ADP sells. So the North Star in this situation is quite truly being a full embedded solution and perhaps a benefit stack if we purely stick to this example of Cocoon. But to get there, there's so many steps, and you might find that, especially like given the startups on this call are ranging from seed to perhaps a little later in stage, there's different levels of product market fit that you have. There's different expectations from who's buying your product. Integration from the get-go might not make sense. So how do you sort of truly build up there while having the mind share of the seller, while having like leverage in the sales cycle, and also being able to maintain all that in a fashion where it can scale as you grow, your product matures, all of that?
I think that's spot on. Aro and Rick, you're reading my mind because the the thing that we've been talking about is almost ski analogies for how hard certain go-to-market motions are. So when we talked about selling into HR, we talked about how SMB is like skiing the greens, and selling in the mid-market is like skiing the blues, and selling into enterprise like skiing black diamonds. Watch out, right? Channel is a black diamond, truly. For a lot of the reasons that Rick mentioned, right? You're thinking about you're not only selling another sales team, figuring out how to incentivize them, but you need to enable them as well, right? And so a mistake that I see a lot of founders make is spending all this effort chasing a partnership, finally signing it, announcing it, and it generates no revenue because you haven't actually figured out how to activate the sales teams who have the influence on the end customer. And I think Aru, to your point, it really requires a crawl, walk, run type of approach, right? These are very long types of relationship building sales cycles. I remember, just to use kind of like ADP or like Guardian as examples, right? With Cocoon, we first met at ADP years and years and years ago, far before we announced any kind of partnership or started doing any kind of distribution together, because it takes that long to even get to know each other, frankly, at this level and figure out what are the right business units to go into, who are the right stakeholders, and so forth. So that's the main kind of takeaway of this slide, which is generally when you think about when do you want to start going after channel, I would say it's typically after you've established a repeatable direct sales motion. And then you've got kind of like referenceable customers who Rick can talk to, or Derek, when he was leading, product teams at Workday, could reference, and Aru could talk to and see, oh, there's a lot of excitement around your offering, right? There's a lot of happy customers here. We actually now trust you to access our customer base through that. So it's very much a sequencing piece in this game of scaling your revenue, because we want to be very careful about jumping straight to Black Diamond without first training on the greens and blues first.
Yeah, and I would say, the value of having like Aru or Derek, representing in understanding what you guys are doing and building, and have them be able to articulate that and guide you through the organizations in a way where they can give you insight as to what business unit would be the best, sales cycles, how that works, integration, walk run type of sequencing. All of that is critical. You need somebody on the inside. You need somebody who's going to be your champion, who this partnership is going to really work with, to be able to guide you through all that. So you're not just going blind.
Absolutely. I would even say that you might need more than one champion,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes that very often in enterprise setups. There's churn in an organization, people are stretched on bandwidth, multiple priorities, so much happening, and truly it's a black box. So you have no visibility as a partner what's happening with the enterprise. So try having multiple champions, try having like very clear joint value proposition. I think mutual customers or referenceable customers is one great way of doing that. I know when
Yeah.
Cocoon sort of came on board, and this is a strategy we apply at large, even at ADP, we try and see how many mutual customers do you have, and if that sample size to begin with is effective. I mean, it could be a small number, but if it's an impressive set of clients or something that we think can become a bigger bucket with that repeatable sales motion, there's so much value in that.
Yeah, I love that advice, Aru, on pointing out where you already have shared customers, right? Because in the example of Cocoon, right, it's like, oh, great, we already have all these customers who are using ADP for payroll, or oh, great, we already have all these customers who are using Guardian for their disability insurance. There's already existing proof that your solution works well with the product that you're partnering with, and existing proof that the end customers are demanding what you're offering.
Yeah, and I would say, and I've seen this in other startups a little bit more advanced in their funding, but they they're not they're looking at potential channel partnerships and all that stuff in the SMB space to be able to do that one to many concept, because they just can't field a sales force. But they are going up market enterprise. I know Cocoon, Lauren, you guys did this up market. If you can find a marquee customer, right, someone that's going to adopt your product and bring it in their cycle and have that as a meaningful referenceable client that says, oh, this scaled, well-known client did X with you. That is really valuable, because that goes a long way to say, okay, proof of concept here. They went through the purchasing. They ran you through their kind of procurement process, if you will, and they've kicked the tires, and they invested in this in a way, and that they deployed it against their employees. That goes a long way to establishing that.
Yes, because if an enterprise has already kind of signed off on it, that's one sort of confirmation point. Derek, please.
Yeah, I all great points in conversation. I think one of the things that I ran into when I started the ecosystem at Workday was understanding what are the different types of relationships that exist that someone can have with my company, or that I want to allow. And so channel is a really important thing to unpack, because what Guardian might be as a channel might be different than what ADP is as a channel. And let me elaborate a little more. So if you think about your sales funnel, you got your top of your funnel, which is leads, and you got the bottom of the funnel, which is closed won deals, whether it's SMB or enterprise, whatever it is. And so you're just sitting there saying, how do I get the most in the top and the most through the funnel? And so when you make a relationship with a partner, both of you are asking, how are we impacting each other's ability to execute more effectively on that funnel? So that's like the fundamental thing that's at play. And so if I was like 7-Eleven, I'm a great distribution channel to resell Snickers. I buy inventory, I have foot traffic, I resell. And for that, I keep a lot of the profit because I do the selling. I am literally the channel by which Snickers gets sold. I pay them for the product, which is very different than, hey, someone walks into 7-Eleven and the cashier is like, you need life insurance? Let me refer you to Derek Butts, my life insurance agent. Oh, I'll take that referral. And the person calls Derek Butts, the insurance agent, and buys some insurance. Well, the person that did all the selling was me. My partnership was a referral partnership. And so as you think about each of your business models, they're different depending on what part of the care economy you're in. But when you look at a company that sells software like ADP or like Workday, you have to ask, are they going to sell my software on their paper? I.e., are they going to write a contract that includes my software and they're literally doing the selling for me? Or are they lead gen for me effectively? I'm in their marketplace. I have an integration. I even have a good relationship with their, New Jersey, New York regional sales manager, and she brings me into every deal. Those are leads. And so when you think about these partnerships, and that will dictate the commercial relationship you have, and it might also impact what a crawl, walk, run can even look like. Because a crawl in the parlance of a software company is, do you have shared customers and have you integrated with us? That might be pre-partnership. And well, that gives you the right to apply to be a partner, and we'll run you through our process, and you get access to an instance, and you can build more integrations and have a certification stamp that says you're certified, so you can go pitch our sales team and customers, and it's marketing. And the path to those is going to be through the partnership teams, perhaps, through ventures, perhaps, through the channel leaders. The other end of the spectrum is they're selling, like their salespeople get paid when your stuff gets sold. And that, of course, is the ultimate one-to-many. And when I listen to Rick, I get excited about some of the things that he was talking about, the platform that Guardian represents, for example, because my intuition says that might be a place where you build this deep relationship. They'll understand your products, and then they'll actually put them in part of their cart, if you will, to sell, which might be different than your first partnership with a Workday, which is, hey, you're in our ecosystem, and you solve a gap in our product, and our salespeople, when they sell a new HR customer, they've got to fill this gap, and you're the only one, so they'll bring you into the deal, but you still have to close it. So I'll pause there because I think those things are important when you assess it. And when you think about the vendor's perspective, remember, they have a funnel too. So they're just trying to affect how do you expand and accelerate both ends of the funnel for the ecosystem. So think about how your offering expands that value, and you can have lots of demonstrated proof points, but that intersection of how do you add value, how do you expand or accelerate their commercial endeavors, combined with what's the model, can give you a map of understanding of like, what's this thing going to look like, and what am I going to get out of it, and how much do I want to put into it? But
Yeah,
people
I think
start off with approach Workday and be like, hey, we integrate. Can you sell? I'd be like, well, we don't do that at this point. Now, Workday's evolved a lot. There are things that might happen, but I just wanted to share that. Sorry, Rick. I just over.
No, I think that you brought out a really, really good point. And I know, Aru is nodding your head too. So think about it this way. I'll just articulate that a little bit more, a little bit differently. We're a product manufacturer, so we manufacture dental, vision, life. We resell life, but dental, vision, life, disability, some work site, hospital indemnity, critical illness, accident. So in as a product manufacturer, if you think about it this way, there are different categories of partnerships that we brought in. So like Spring Health is a good example. So spring we brought in complete mental wellness solution, and we looked across the enterprise, the whole space. We really bought into their model. We think, and we put a stake in the ground from a commercial partnership relationship, but we did actually an investment relationship with them too. And what does that do for us? One, it's addressing like a really serious member societal need that is very adjacent to what we're trying to do, which is help employers create wellness for their members, for their employees, right? So it's one of our base missions as a company, but also it helps us shorten durations of incidents. So lower incidence levels, people going out on leave or going out on a short-term disability or long-term disability because of comorbidity, health, mental wellness issues or mental health issues, and then reducing leave. So like reducing the time that you actually have to be out for a particular condition because of a comorbidity, depression issue, whatever. There's a bunch of different categories of things that you could apply mental wellness related to our underlying like disability product, for instance, right? So there's some adjacencies around that really cohesively makes sense for the member experience, enhanced member experience, but our underlying product and the products that we have. And if you're doing some reduction in the durations and you're helping employers, right, with presenteeism, absenteeism through whatever you're building in the family space, that is all part of what we're trying to do. So it really makes sense for us. And so from that perspective, we're integrating that in a way and bringing that back out through these various channels, whether it's, ADP Total Source or PEOs or, Rippling or Gusto or whatever, we're placing those products in an integrated play there. But to Derek's point, you could have someone like ADP say, hey, listen, I'll bring you on as a certified seller onto our platform. It's going to be in our marketplace and people can go find it. And that's a different, it's a totally different, I think, value that you have to be cognizant of.
Totally. I think the Snickers analogy is a really good one, Derek, because it's the difference, right, between who's actually doing the bulk of the work in the selling process. And back to Aru's analogy of the crawl, walk, run, right? It might actually make sense for you to start in more of a lead gen model, get to know each other a bit more as partners, right? And then get to a space where you've shown demonstrated success. Okay, now there's an opportunity to say, hey, why don't we do more together? Is an opportunity where your sales reps are directly selling the product integrated into our solution, for example.
That has to be a model that business supports as well. I mean, but that's part of understanding the landscape and getting to know your ecosystem. The other thing I was going to say, and Aru is about to say something as well, is, Rick mentioned investment. Aru has a job that's, in ventures. Workday has ventures. A lot of these ecosystem leaders invest in companies. And what's really interesting is when they make an investment, they have the attention of the product groups because they're senior people in the company. So the ventures group has the ability to navigate the organization. That it's not a guarantee you're going to get what you want because it's an investment. They're separate, but it's just another way to think about the channel. I don't want to speak for Rick or for Aru on that, but it's something that I've observed. Seed stage and early stage companies have a competitive advantage, which is they might be investment worthy that increases the relative value of a partnership as well as perhaps provide some acceleration potential or exposure potential for that company. Aru, I think you might have something to say on this one.
Yeah, I think honestly, firstly, this is a treasure chest of a discussion. It has so many themes that if you pay attention to, I think you'll truly crack channel. But to sort of tie in some of what has already been discussed, right? If I take very specifically the case of ADP, there's perhaps three different ways in which any company can engage with ADP. One is you go the marketplace route where you do a referral partnership, which is purely lead gen. Second is perhaps you connect with a BU and they sort of champion your initiative. And the third is via ventures. And I think the degrees of adoption across all these three vary. And it also is a function of how ready you are as a company. marketplace might be more, it's low stakes, right? It's purely an integration. It's PR that sort of faces up as progress, but doesn't really mean true partnership in most cases, because they might be selling internal products and sales teams might be getting like a larger portion of the pie for that versus your referral. So they will sort of calibrate how much mind share to give to you. Whereas when you go to a BU, they expect you to be a fully built out product. That's when they're willing to sort of integrate deeply, embed you into the product. That's when you have pricing discussions. You're probably doing white labeling, there's a flat fee, you're defining a service model of who does what in that equation. And that's truly the North Star for any startup. I think companies that offer a venture platform, it's a very interesting and a unique situation, because very often, or at least in the case of ADP Ventures, we're willing to adopt you when you've just about hit product market fit, because we think you have massive potential. But we know that putting you through the grind of what a complex enterprise has to go through can be very challenging. So, how do we build that joint roadmap of going to market, joint roadmap of catering to BU needs? That sort of happens. So I think it truly boils down to, if you connect all of the things that have been sort of just discussed, PR is great, but doesn't really mean true partnership. What truly is at the back end of that is multiple champions, perhaps, a very clear strategy for sales enablement, because that's a key piece of who's selling. Are you truly like getting the benefits of low CAC distribution through a channel? And thirdly, maybe like integrate when you've established interest, because until then it's a drain on your resources and you don't know how
Right.
that's truly going to scale.
Yeah, I think RU started actually talking a bit about pricing, which is what some of the questions in the chat are about as well, because there are these different models, right? Back to Derek's Snicker analogy, where there's the marketplace in ADP world versus, like, let's say like the run version of a partnership would be your product is embedded. It might even be white labeled within the overall offering. Those also have different economic models attached to them. So, Jay Vest asked a question in the chat, which I think is really sharp. How does pricing for accessing these platforms vary according to these different models, right? And Derek, I know you started kind of jumping in with some thoughts on that front. I don't know if you want to elaborate or just kind of like help us think through how these different levels of selling the product versus being lead gen actually cost you more or less too as a founder.
There's like a simple concept, and then there's like the practical reality by vendor. And so like the way Rick might approach this as a company is going to be varied. But like, let's say,
Yeah.
if someone is carrying, so I'm going to speak in terms of just like very on the ground, like if someone's carrying your product in their bag and they're selling it for you, or their window, their store window, their marketplace is the place where people go to actually transact. You're buying disability, you're also going to add this. You know, we're your storefront and it's on our paper. You're going to pay a percent of sales, probably. Or, you know, because everyone's products in that marketplace or in that distribution may have different prices. And so they're not going to just be like, it's $1,000. And so if Guardian is selling your product, I'm not going to speak for Guardian actually, but like let's say Workday was to resell your product, right? They're going to ask for a significant chunk of revenues because they're doing a lot of the work and you're manufacturing it for them. It's like they're 7-Eleven for you at some level. The other end of it is like a handshake. Hey, we want to be part of your integration ecosystem. We want to be like in your thing. Okay, well, I have to pay an annual fee. I get a tenant. I get some amount of tech support. I get access to the portal, and I can put a little thing on the marketplace, and there's a, you know, bronze, silver, gold. And if I do gold, I also get mentioned at the, you know, on the screen, but only at the bottom of the slide. If I'm platinum, I'm on the top of the slide with only 4 others. You know, those are pay to play, and they're about marketing. And it's all the way from that base level, like practical product integration. I'm in your ecosystem. A salesperson can show, oh yeah, they integrate. Yep, it's fine. You're usually going to pay like an annual fee and avoid everything you can to pay a percent on that. But if someone's going to sell your product and obviate the need for you to have the selling, I mean, that's worth a lot. That's worth what is, Mars pay 7-Eleven? And I mean, Rick, hopefully I haven't misrepresented the marketplace
No,
of
I think from a care I think you're spot on in that there's this level of, how do you come to a channel partner? And so like the insurance carrier side, what we do is, we charge basically a premium per person that we're covering based on the product, right? So yeah, at the end of the day, it's a per monthly, premium amount that we're charging depending on the product. And so when we look at these different, I'd say in these categories, point solution, partnership.
Is it me or is Rick?
Ooh,
you
I think
froze.
Rick may have frozen briefly.
Well, am I back?
Oh, you're back. You're back.
Okay,
Continue.
sorry, I don't know when I left off, but I would say from an insurance care perspective, you want to look at it as a right per category of product per se. And what we're really interested, am I freezing again?
It's freezing a little bit, Rick. I don't know
Shoot,
if
sorry
it
about
helps.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe you can give us sort of like the
I
quick.
would say,
Yep.
so let me put it this way. A lot of the point solutions that are out there do a monthly PEPM type of concept. We would look in this situation to try to come up with a version of your product that would be a PEPM light. In other words, um, I would give you an example like Cocoon, for instance. Like we worked and said, hey, listen, the full stack solution that you're charging the enterprise market is too much for what we would be doing as a partnership PPM. So could we take like your planning tool and use that and come up with a PPM that we can use and embed into our total disability product per se, or some other version of that? So like I'll give you another example. We have smoking cessation with Pelago as a partnership. It's like a very reasonable, sub 20 cents PPM that we've negotiated for their product and the access to the product. And then we've just embedded that into our core product, right? So what we know is that down market in the SMB space, they've been PPM'd to death. And they also don't want to go through data security and procurement for all these different point solutions. And so having us do that on their behalf and do it by best in class category and then bringing them into the mix of our product portfolio really makes sense down market. And that's from our perspective what we're looking to do. And we have a bunch of different category players that we're advancing in all kinds of areas, whether it's maternity, family care, all these different things. So, but we're embedding that, right? So we're doing the administration, we're doing the procurement, we're doing the data security on doing that on behalf of the market. And then we're incorporating the cost in there to the extent that we can.
Rick, I
And
think one thing you highlighted is both the benefit of working with a channel and also something very potentially challenging and almost like a run phase of partnership, which is one huge benefit if you can, again, like there's, let's say like lots of SMBs out there and you're already the vetted solution, right? Through a partner that they already have to purchase, right? They don't have to go through another security situation and so forth.
right.
A challenge that you mentioned as well is using Cocoon as an example, right? Is there may be you might have a full stack product, but the partner may say, "Hey, I'm actually really interested in the light version of your product in this way," right?
That's right.
And so what makes channel hard is you also have to think about how your product could be modular, which might involve a
That's right.
lot of engineering effort, right? And so again, this is part of like why channel is Black Diamond is because there's a lot of these considerations that you have to kind of like work with the partner to figure out how to get to some of these like ideal states where your product is being sold off the manufacturing line with the existing with the channel
Yeah,
suite.
exactly. And like Cocoon, for instance, we have our own apps product that we're developing, and most of the insurance carriers have that on the ancillary side. That self disability, they actually have an absence product that goes with it to track it and help the customer do all that. Well, that you guys do that in your full stack, right? As you go out to market. So, but we found a way to be able to collaborate together on the planning and some other pieces of it. So the advice that we had was, hey, could you just modulate your product and then uncouple, and then we can think about ways to do that. So flexibility, absolutely, per channel partner. Like you can go with ADP or Workday and sell full stack Cocoon all day long, and I think it works well in that scenario. For the insurance carrier side, depending on what products they have and how you're going to meld with those products, you really have to think about the flexibility of what you're building.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Um, okay, I think there's another question from Amanda. Amanda, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, guys. Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. Thank you guys for all of this. It's been a super educational hour. I have a bit of a high level question, if you'll forgive me. I feel like we've gotten into really granular nitty gritty stuff, which is great, but just like taking a step back and almost kind of piggybacking on Lauren's comment just now of like modulating a product so that the partnership works or, you know, kind of allows you into channel. Question for all three of you or anybody that this resonates with. In your experience with companies, what has been like, you know, like an example of something where you're like, wow, this is never going to work, to something switched, whether it was a modulating product or something the founder did, or some kind like the PEPM change, like something that when we as founders feel like that I've been at this for 18 months, right? Or like however long that, you know, I'm at the ninth point of contact. What's something that triggered for you guys on your side that like the aha moment, I guess, that might give us glimmers of hope?
Such a good question. Derek, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it has all to do with what's happening in the field and nothing to do with the conversations you're having at corporate or in product at some level. Um, and like to me, and I mean, this is going to sound crass, perhaps, but like if I'm responsible for any of these ecosystems, there may be thousands of customers and 500, 1,000, 500 existing partners and 2,000 trying to get in the door. So I really care about everybody. Like I want you to succeed, but I'm not going to be able to really do anything for you. Don't expect any development work. Don't expect us to do anything necessarily, unless our product team is like, oh my gosh, we're going to do something special with you. And that certainly happens all the time, but not to everybody. And so the real thing is, I think, come back to understanding what is it that makes the most sense, both for your product and your customers. And it's okay to innovate there. You know, but the innovation is around how do you seamlessly make this magical for the partner you're courting. Like
Yeah.
if you could magically make Workday better without me having to do anything, it's so easy for me to pick up the phone and call the head of product and be like, you should see this. But if it's like, well, we have to build an API and benefits that we don't have, but it would be amazing. Like, you know, you could talk to 9 people at Workday, including the founder, and they'd be like, well, sorry.
Yeah, I think he's spot on. Like in these big platforms like ADP, Workday, you have to literally serve it up to say there is no reason why, like there's no work and no reason why you would want to do this, right? And I think that's the trick with to get in there. And then you have to think about this from the context of how can I create a product and build a product that's going to be so meaningful to their members, their worksite employers and members, that they're going to want it and they're going to really see the value in it. So think about it from that perspective too. And I think that's where if you can say no integration issues, I can serve this thing up in a way that's super easy for you to be able to bring it, and your members are going to really love this for this reason, right? And it's going to be able to help their salespeople sell, all these retained customers, all those different things. So I think those are the cases. From an insurance carrier perspective, think about it from incidents, duration, claims, all those different perspectives that really helps the insurance carrier think about this in the context of their underlying core products and how you're delivering a better member experience, you're solving a really meaningful issue for their members, and it's also complementary to their core products. And if you do that on the insurance side, that dialogue can get accelerated pretty fast.
Go for it, Aru.
To piggyback off of Rick's core product point, I think that's where it becomes tricky. Sometimes when companies offer something that's core to them, you have to be very strategic about how you're introducing your product. I think data sits at the bedrock of this argument, be it data on like mutual clients or joint value proposition. I think both of them become really, really important. I'll give you two examples of how this played out with some of our portfolio companies. Take the example of Cocoon. For instance, Cocoon is a software product. But when you talk about the world of leaves, it's a spectrum from like software to managed services. As Cocoon sort of entered this world, they were very software first. So they had to show willingness to be able to customize their product to build something that also works for service teams, which would then cater to the ADP PEO client base. So you then set out on this vision where you co-develop and co-own the roadmap to build something that unlocks a distribution channel or a lever within ADP for you. I think it very much takes that willingness to adapt. But I think the thing to be cautious about here is whatever changes you make to your product, it has to also be viable at large for other channel partnerships.
Applicable across, right?
Yes, that I think is core. The second example, I think, is we have a portfolio company called Naya that started out in the space of decision support. What's really interesting is Naya started its journey as a partnership first with ADP, but it was such an ambiguous problem for everyone to digest. And I think data really played a big role here. When you think about the world of decision support, there's 80% of like employed population that wants benefits. They want healthcare, they want medical, they want vision, they want everything. But when it comes to enrolling, 50% of these people drop off because they just don't know how to make that decision. So just bringing that to life in the form of a joint value prop, because this is money on the table that employers dedicate, but it's just not used. I think clearly defining impact value proposition using logic and being open to adapting frameworks or product roadmaps, I think will go a long way there.
Yeah, and I know we're bumping into time, and I would say this feels like really intimidating. And you mentioned the Black Diamond, scenario here. It's worth it though. Like it's obviously the scale of what you can do with your company with these channel partnerships is big. So I would say absolutely do it. Find the right channel. Seek out like these venues and other folks in the industry that you can tap into to be able to really calibrate what makes sense for what you're doing. But by all means, if you're thinking about, this as a viable distribution channel opportunity or strategy for you, you should pursue it. And I know it seems complex and challenging, but the payoff is clearly obviously big. So I would encourage you to find as many people as you can like this and get as much advice as you can to really understand that value prop.
That's a really good note to wrap on, Rick, because at the end of the day, anything that's hard, anything that's worth going after is going to be hard, right? But the ROI is absolutely there, which is why we're having this conversation. And thank you hugely, Aru, Derek, and Rick for your insights here, because truly it is a black box, and having insiders who've navigated it before is incredibly helpful. So really appreciate each of you. And for everyone else on the line, we will see you next week for our next session. And we're excited for diving a little bit more deeper into sales on that next session. And in the meantime, check out some of our follow-up events that are happening in New York, as well as Anna's going to be in DC next week. So we'll keep everyone posted on that front. And thank you again, Aru, Derek, and Rick, and have a great rest of the week, team.